Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows homes, so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews, all on the app. Download today.
So hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unpacking Possibility. I'm your host, Traci Stein, as always. I'm so happy to be here with you. I decided to record a little extra interview. And I'm saying extra because I actually have a terrific interview scheduled for tomorrow with Harvard psychologist Carol Janandis, and we'll talk about all the amazing things hypnosis can do. But I also was thinking today, I was listening to various things on just in the news and on other podcasts that made me think about something that I haven't talked about in a while. I've alluded to it in different episodes, but that's like the biggest mistake. This is the topic, the biggest mistake, or one of them anyway, that nice people make and how to do better. And I'm saying that as a recovering nice person. And it does not mean, by the way, anything I'm going to say, it doesn't mean you're not going to be nice, a good person, likable. You will still be all of those things and even more. But hopefully by the end of this podcast episode, you will have tools for being nice to yourself as well. And I'm saying that because sometimes people conflate niceness with just kind of not allowing themselves to have needs or normal healthy boundaries and so forth. And there are reasons for that, and we'll get into it. But when I've spoken about this previously or back in the days when I was still writing for Psychology Today online, this was a topic that people again and again were like, that's me. Right? And it's tough because there are things in the psychology world. I'm going to tell you a psychology term you don't have to remember, or two of them. But when there's something that we're doing, even if it causes us distress, and we know it does, but our ego is really tied to it and our identity is tied to it, and we're not really sure we want to let it go. It's called ego syntonic. You don't have to remember that. And it's called ego dystonic if we're like, yeah, I do this thing and I can't stand it, and I 100% know I want to let it go, right? But so often, some of the stuff we do, we have decided it's part of our identity, and it becomes a lot harder to make a shift, even if refusing to make the shift actually is harmful for us. But I want to get into this. So, kind of related to this is that several years ago now, I did a multi-year study, just self-funded, a survey online, and I called it the Tireless Caregiver Survey. And I got some feedback from somebody saying, and she's not wrong, well, it's not really a great description because people might think of caregiver as just somebody who's taking care of an ill relative. Totally get that. And the tireless part might sound to somebody like you never get tired of doing it. And I don't mean either of those things. What I mean by the term, and we can come up with a different term, is that there are people whose entire way of being is oriented around making other people happy, taking care of everybody else's needs, as if it is a tireless job. But it isn't. It's actually quite exhausting. And I'll talk about that today as well. So again, biggest mistake, or one of them, that quote, I'm going to put in air quotes, nice people make, and maybe how and why to do better. That's the theme of this episode. But as I'm sharing these kind of little bullet points, think about, does this sound like you? Right? And for a lot of people, it does sound like them. And in fact, I'll tell you, I went in my survey, I'm going to mouse over and see if I have it open, but, I had 444 people respond. Most people answered all of the 75 questions, including the ones where you had to write in more detail about what things had been like for you, that is highly unusual to have a response rate and a completion rate like that. But the first question I had was, and I didn't publish the results of the survey anywhere. I was thinking about writing a book about it. I haven't. I may still do that. But the first question was, I feel internal pressure to take care of others in some way, emotionally, physically, or financially. This will just give you an idea if this sounds like you. Over 94% of people said yes. I feel that internal pressure to do this. And we'll talk about why in a few moments. I feel good when people feel they can rely on me. That in and of itself is not bad. But again, almost 94% of people said, yeah. And then here's where it gets a little complicated, where it becomes about more than just being a nice person, but the fear of being a bad person or having other people think you're a bad person. I worry that if I don't take care of other people, they won't like or love me. They won't like me or they won't love me. And 65% of this total sample, so 288 of the 444 people said, yeah, if I don't take care of other people, I'm afraid they won't love me or they won't like me. And again, let me just, for any statisticians or survey designers out there, I'm very aware that the people who chose to respond to this survey were probably more likely to be real caretakers, right? So it's, oversampling people who tend to take care of everybody. But I think it's still really important. More than half of the people who took this survey also said other people in my life react angrily to me if I say no to a request, right? 58% almost. So I want you to think about that. I'm only going to read a few more of the questions. I'm not going to read all 75, but almost 79% of people, think about that, close to 80%, said I was known as some version of mother's little helper or the good girl or the good boy while growing up. And again, not bad to be a good kid. That's not what I'm saying. And I think you probably, if you identify with this, you understand why there's a subset of people who are like, yes, yes, yes. And the stuff that could be seen in a positive light is bundled with some stuff that makes people's lives really difficult. Just a few more. I am asked to do things for people more often than others seem to be. 74% of people in this survey. And this will be the last one for this, but I have a hard time saying no to people, even when a part of me wants to. Every single person who answered this survey answered this question, and almost 90% of them said yes. I have a hard time saying no, even if I really want to. So I won't belabor that, but there are good reasons for this. And if this is you, I hope this episode is helpful. Or if you have a friend or a family member that is kind of getting burnt out, that was one of the later questions in my survey, but like whether you're feeling physical or emotional burnout, and you're probably not shocked to hear that taking care of everybody else at your own expense, like your body and your emotions will start telling you, I can't do this anymore. This isn't good for you. So why do we do this? And I'm going to tell you, nice is such an interesting word, isn't it? So many of us are socialized to be nice, especially girls. But you know what? There are plenty of, men who will remember being socialized to take care of everybody else, to be, quote, nice. And there are lots of reasons for that. We're certainly not going to be able to touch on all of them. But I'm going to say, in addition to the wiring to be nice, because some people just aren't. I mean, and you don't have to be a full psychopath to not be that nice, although some people are psychopathic, right? They'll score higher on a measure of that, right? Where they really just don't care. Or there's some people who are just super self-absorbed, super toxic, super entitled. Narcissist, the term is used a lot, probably overused today. But when I say it, who in your life might make you think of that term, right? People who are really self-centered, self-absorbed, low to no empathy, and they're very entitled. They expect things of others that they themselves wouldn't feel like they needed to do. Well, nice people are magnets for those people, and they have a really hard time saying no. I actually think the uber nice people in the world have a hard time seeing people as they are as well. Again, I think women and young girls are still socialized to be nice before even having healthy boundaries. I think in some places that's really changing, and thank God. But more than men, we're not really raised to assert ourselves. And again, as I'm disclosing, I am a recovering, overly nice person. I'm still fairly nice, but in a different way. So the challenge here is that if you believe that you have to take care of other people in order to be worth something and for them to love you or like you, whether or not you're fully conscious of this tendency, you probably are. If you're an adult, people have probably tried to helpfully tell you that. Some people might not really be. Or they'll say, well, that's just the way I am. But whether or not you're fully conscious of this tendency, you will do a few things that I'm going to put under the heading of going to a poison well, right? It's a metaphor I've used on the podcast. It's a metaphor I've absolutely used with patients, but it's like going to drink from a poison well again and again, or a well where there's not a lot of water. Maybe it's a dry well. I mean, it could be bone dry, and that's pretty extreme, but it could also be that, there's a little water in the well, but you can't always access it, or it's just kind of stagnant, or it tastes bad, different degrees. But that metaphor, I think, is really apt because we all have needs for love and care. We all do. There's not a baby that comes into this world that doesn't have a need for love and care and to feel safe, to feel important. And if we're told that we're not entitled to that, whether directly or indirectly, if that's communicated to us in some way that our needs aren't really important or other people's needs are more important, we will probably continue throughout our lives until we say, that's it. Going to dry wells or worse, going to wells where the water, it might not kill us, but it'll make us feel ill. And I think it's a good metaphor for this type of imbalance in our relationships, because what happens is even if there are wells nearby that have abundant, clean, fresh water, again, if you don't feel worthy, right? Or if you're drawn to saving everybody, that's one type of, I'm going to call it the tireless caregiver. And we know it's not a tireless job. We know it's exhausting, but you'll keep, again, consciously or unconsciously going to dry wells or toxic wells. You'll be in front of a well that has abundant, refreshing, clean water, and you won't feel entitled to drink. So I'm going to give you some examples. I've used these examples before, but, you're the person who has so much going for you, but you keep dating person after person, even if they start out seeming different from each other, or things start out going pretty well. It's the person who doesn't get back to you. And I don't mean once in a while or you have different communication styles. I mean the person who makes it clear that you're not really important, even if they know it's important to you. Right. And again, I'm not talking about an insane amount of communication. I'm talking about your baseline normal level, you've made plans and the person doesn't show. Or you, they go for you're dating, but you go for really long, periods of time where you're not even sure if you're in a relationship because the communication's just really poor. Or, worse, you're in a relationship where the person cheats on you and then blames you and, or whatever, or is disrespectful to you again and again in some noticeable way, or they expect you to kind of like, I don't know, take on the role of caretaker for them, even though they're able-bodied and so forth. And I'm trying not to be too specific just because I don't want to share anybody else's personal stuff, but this is not that unheard of. But you might feel like a doormat sometimes, or maybe it's not that obvious, but you have friendships with people who, again, they take more than they give. There's a real imbalance. Or you're at a job and everybody relies on you. So maybe you don't get the bonus you wanted, or you don't get the raise you wanted, or the promotion you wanted because, people might not feel like they need to give you that much. There's not a balance in the working relationship either, but yet you'll be the one who's asked to stay late again and again, or you'll be the one who's asked to take on the lion's share of various projects. Right. So I'm not talking about not getting ahead because you're not competent or not doing your job. It's like, or you're the person whose boss or coworker asks you for things that are inappropriate, like, can you get my dry cleaning? Can you, that actually happened. Or can you babysit my kids? And maybe it's maybe it's your boss, maybe it's your coworker, maybe it's your professor. I don't know, but it's not appropriate. But for some reason, they think it's appropriate to ask you, right? And if you're not sure, ask yourself, well, would I feel comfortable asking somebody for that? And if the answer is no, or you feel uncomfortable when I say it, that's kind of a clue that there's a lack of balance or reciprocity in your relationships. Or you feel like you're hanging in there for whether it's a friendship, a sibling relationship, a parent relationship, whatever, but you feel like you are responsible for keeping the other person happy because that is the only way to maintain the relationship, right? Or you find you're walking on eggshells too much of the time. You really probably shouldn't be doing that much of any of the time. Or, your friends over-rely on you and they're calling you at all kinds of hours instead of going and getting professional help. And again, it's not about never being there for a friend. It's about not filling a need that another person should reasonably be expected to get filled somewhere else or fill themselves. I mean, money can come into this. It can be the person that's like, hey, can I borrow a few bucks or whatever? And it's not a few bucks, it's a good amount, and I'll pay back next week or in 2 weeks or whatever. And the paying back never really happens. It's inequitable, right? But they'll still ask you. And it doesn't matter if you make more or not. That's not the point, is that adults, we're supposed to be in relationship and there should be some, notable support, but it needs to be balanced. And you'll know if it's not balanced because you'll feel drained, you'll feel exhausted. And that's actually what the people in my survey said. Overwhelmingly, they said, I'm exhausted. Or like, almost like, getting, and I've had this with people who've come to see me clinically. I've seen this outside of clinical practice. And I know from my own experience, that feeling where you're like, God, if you get the flu, it's almost a relief because it's the only time you get a break, right? By the way, if you do get the flu or you are, not doing well, notice if the people that you put a lot of energy out into taking care of, maybe in a literal caretaking way as well, if they take care of you when you need it, or offer sincerely, or just do something. But the people who are super nice and super caregiving are often the ones putting out so much of the energy that it's just, again, it is exhausting. It is unbalanced. So many different ways this can manifest. I have to take a quick break just because I'm supposed to, not because this is too much to talk about. And I want you to know we are going to get to the things you can do, but I just need to take a quick break so we can hear word from our sponsors, and I'll be right back.
The jackpots continue to soar. Go to any New York Lottery retailer today for your chance to win the Powerball jackpot or play for your chance to win the Mega Millions jackpot. Please play responsibly. Gambling problem? Call the Hope Line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm talking about big mistakes that nice people do and how, more importantly, how we can stop doing that and create more of a feeling of balance in ourselves and in our relationships. It's not easy. I don't want you to think that it is, but it is possible. So before the break, we were talking about some examples of people, who tend to kind of take advantage of you, the super duper nice person, the person who was raised to be a nice person, the person who understandably wants people to like and love you. And you might find yourself letting a lot of the backhanded compliments, like, oh, nice shoes on you or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Some of the mean type of behavior that people can engage in. That's another way of being overly nice and caretaking and taking responsibility for the relationship. So if you're putting up with, again, behavior that seems unkind or disrespectful, and again, it if you wouldn't do it, or if you did say something similar, it would be like slapped down right away. And anybody in your life can be like this, but I have to tell you, we've talked about intuitive things before and people really having a sixth sense. I think we all do. But even if you don't want to think about it like that, and you just want to think about it as an unconscious knowing, self-absorbed, toxic, or just not really, people who are inconsiderate, they're expert. It's uncanny at finding you, the person who is going to be willing to do the lion's share of the work in the relationship. Again, it could be at work, it's a coworker, it's a boss, it's a sibling, it's a partner, it's a good friend, right? And I think what makes it so challenging sometimes is that the people you're dealing with very often won't be, quote, all bad. There will be lots of things you do like about them, and there will be times when you have a lot of fun. But notice what percentage of the time that is. Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Do you have to walk on eggshells to make the relationship work? Do you have to just sit there while somebody goes on and on about, their needs or their problems, and you just you don't really have space in the relationship? It's a lifelong journey if you're a nice person, because again, some of us just really care. We want to be supportive. We're wired that way. Again, we're probably socialized to be that way as well. And we get positive feedback. Wow, so-and-so is such a nice person. Oh, they're so caring. I feel so much better talking to you, right? Thank you so much. But if something is really unbalanced, even if a party is super invested in being the, quote, nice person, the person everybody can go to, it does have a cost when it's super out of balance. The other thing I want to say is, I touched on this before. A lot of times people also have a hard time setting limits with a person because if you are a caregiving or a caretaking person, you will feel responsible not only for the success or failure of the relationship, but you will see the nice parts of the person or the great times as the real person. And the not good stuff, you'll find all the good reasons, again, air quotes around good reasons, why somebody was behaving that way, as if it's not really part of the person, right? So the person who's kind of nasty or, doesn't show up for you in the way you show up for them, like, oh, well, they were having a tough week at work, or that's how they were raised. You're kind of trying to look for the good reasons, and they might actually be things that are contributors, and we all have our stuff. It does not absolve them from having to be responsible for their behavior and how they treat you, right? I've said it a million times before. You cannot heal another person. Nobody can. I can't. You can't. No one can heal somebody who doesn't want to be healed. And a lot of times when people are used to getting a lot out of you and other people, they quote, the healed, I'm putting it in air quotes again, they don't want that. If somebody lacks empathy, they don't want to become more empathetic because it would cost them something to them. It's hard to have empathy, right? Because we're holding our stuff and everybody else's. So somebody who's not wired for that is not necessarily motivated to feel what you're feeling or be more attuned to what you're feeling. Some people do want to get better. They know, what? I could be a better partner. I could be a better friend. I hear you. I appreciate what you're telling me. But a lot of people don't. And you have to know whether this relationship will actually improve because the other person will be willing to step up and meet you. And honestly, chances are, if they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and above, it ain't going to happen. I'm so sorry. I mean, it could, but you can't heal another person. You can't make another person want to have things be different if there's a large part of them invested in it. And again, all parts of us are the real us. Even if we're having a bad day and we react this way under stress, that's still part of us. It's something for us to work on. So the good stuff and the not good stuff, still the person. And, I think Maya Angelou said this. If I'm misquoting, let me know. But to paraphrase, when people show you who they are, believe them. Believe them the first time. And you're not going to believe them the first time, but by the third, fourth, fifth, 10th time, you got to believe it. That's the person. They're showing you. Everybody eventually shows you who they are. Okay. So let's see. I'm trying to think of what else to add here. But again, your body and your mind will tell you, hey, wake up. Even if you're trying to tell yourself, well, but there's so much good in them, or it's not that bad, or no, it's fine. And, this is just how our relationship is. This is just how I'm wired, whatever. I've seen people, their migraines get worse, or their GI symptoms get worse, or their chronic pain gets worse, or they just have this general malaise and have no energy and they don't know why. Or they become more irritable or more anxious or more depressed. It's because it's so hard to keep giving out, and not be able to receive. Okay. So some other things to just notice. I was thinking about this. Sometimes a self-centered person in your life, they're self-centered, but, they're not a monster. And, if let's just say you are ill or you do need help, and maybe they are there, and maybe they're there because that is an aspect of them, or maybe they're there because they know they need you and they're dependent on you. So if you're not accessible, it kind of activates that in them, that kind of oh, I got to help you feel better. And it could be just that they don't, because it's oh, well, I'm going to go off and do something else until you feel better, but let me know when you feel better. I hope you're better. Let me know if you need anything, but they're really not actually helping you, right? They're not saying, listen, I'm making this soup and I'm bringing it over, right? Your closest friends will do that. The other thing is, and this goes to kind of what you can do. Let's just say one of the things you could do is let's get to that list now. Some things you could do. I'm just going to skip ahead here because there's so much we could say about this, but I think you get where I'm going with this. And let me know, leave me a comment, share what you think. I'm going to say option number one is honestly to do nothing, to just be aware, because you might be saying, oh, that sounds like me. But it might feel like it's too much effort and not worth it. So you might actually go along not setting limits, not distancing yourself emotionally or otherwise from the person, you might just say, listen, this is how I'm going to ride it out. And I want you to know, I'm not feeling judgment about that. I get why sometimes it just feels like it's too much energy to do something different. And if that's your dynamic with whoever in your life and you want to stay with it, it's not wrong if that's what you decide for you, because we all make decisions for ourselves. And I get it. It's really hard. So number one, you could just keep things the same or keep things the same for now and revisit it later. And maybe that's 1B. So number 2 would be maybe just thinking, maybe, but not yet. Kind of related to number 1, but like you're thinking, all right, at some point I've got to make a change. Maybe I'm not ready now. But what I would say is keep a little private journal. And if you don't feel like you can do that, keep a little list in your mind, just where you notice and you observe and just say, well, how do I really feel in this relationship? How does this tend to go? What are some things that feel still okay to me or okay enough? And what are some things that feel not okay? Right? And how do I know that they don't feel okay? Where do I feel it in my body? Where do I feel it in my mind? And it might be that certain things seem more problematic than others, right? And no one's perfect. Your friends, partners, siblings, etc., don't need to be perfect, and neither do you, honestly, even if you feel like you do. But just observe also how often this happens, right? What happens, how you feel about it, but also how often. Number 3, related to number 2, would be like, ask yourself. And again, you can journal this literally if you feel comfortable doing it. If not, just notice in your mind. If I wasn't worried about losing the relationship or making this person angry, what would I want to be different? And just notice what comes up. And you can ask the question and then kind of let it go. Chances are what will happen either something will become abundantly clear to you and you'll be like, oh my God, I would do this. Or yeah, no, if I didn't have to worry about XYZ consequence, I know I would do this. Or I wouldn't take this anymore. Or I would demand this. But it will also start percolating possibly in your dreams, and just little bits of insight, because I really do think the wisest part of you, as soon as you say, okay, I'm willing to take a look at this, you'll notice things start to get clearer. Sometimes, again, more indirectly, you'll have a dream or you'll see something on TV and it'll resonate with you, something that seems like, oh, this seems better or a good way to handle this. Just notice that. Okay, so the next option for something to do, and I've said this in different ways before, is decide, do you want to keep the relationship? And if the answer is, yeah, right now I still want to keep the relationship, but I need some distance from the things that feel the most toxic, decide how you want to create the distance. Now, that could mean that toxic Tessie is texting you 10 times a day, or calling you every night at midnight and you just want to be able to sleep. I wouldn't respond. The most passive, low conflict way would be just respond less often. Create more space between when you respond to that text or that phone call so that you don't feel as drained, right? And that's kind of a way of dipping your toe in the water. A more direct way could be like, listen, I love and care about you, but this feels like a lot for me. You really need to see somebody. I'm glad I've been able to be there for you, but now I need you to, it's a lot for me. It's really weighing on me, and I need you to, however else you want to handle it, that's fine. They'll either still do it for a while, which often happens, and you need to just kind of hold firm. And again, maybe don't answer the phone as much, or they'll go to somebody else and you'll see that they just kind of create distance for you. Maybe they'll get angry and say, whatever. Maybe it's after all I've done for you, whatever it is, or I thought you were my friend. And you can choose how you want to respond to that, including, you know what, I'm not sure how I want to respond to that. I can't talk right now. That's actually valid. Creating some literal space. A lot of times we feel like we can't. And another option is just to really just cut that person loose. Whether it's directly like this doesn't feel like a friendship, this feels hurtful or harmful or not equitable. I feel like I'm giving more than I get. And, sometimes people will respond like, wow, I never knew you thought that way, felt that way or thought that. And it might start to shift something. Sometimes you're just going to let the relationship kind of drift. That happens. It's okay. Sometimes you're going to just say, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And it's really up to you. And I know that sounds really harsh, but, I think about people in my life who, there are people in my life to this day that I love, and I still don't feel like there's adequate balance. And, I have different ways of navigating it. Some of the ways I've said so far tonight. It's not easy when you really care about somebody. And again, you see that they're a complicated person. They're complex like we all are, and they have good things about them. But some people, it's just too hard, or it's too draining. Or maybe it means you meet them out somewhere for coffee, but they're not staying with you for a week. Totally valid. A lot of times people can't take in the feedback we have for them. And maybe this is easier for some people than others, I know, or, over time, as you've thought about this more and more, it might be natural that you get to a point where it's not as big a deal for you, even if it's stressful somewhat, where you're just like, no, sorry, that's not going to work for me. Sorry, I'm not available. If it's on social media, maybe it means muting them for a while so you don't see all their drama. Maybe it means unfriending, and I've done that too. And I think that's actually okay. I think it's really important to decide how much you want to love yourself and how you want to treat yourself. And again, we can be flexible to some extent where we just say, this is the person, this is the best they're going to do, especially if it's a relative or a friend you've had for a long time, or, a parent or an in-law. And some of those people, we may feel like, all right, you're going to be in my life, but you're not going to be in my life in the same way. You're not going to be in my life in the way that requires me to deny that I have equal worth, or where I have to just put up with a lot of crap. Imagine saying that. Just close your door, or get in your car or whatever and say it. I don't have to put up with a lot of crap at this point. I think it's okay. And, I think that most people, by the time they start setting more limits, nice people, they've already gotten, to level 10 out of 10, right? It's where they're frustrated or angry or disappointed enough that it doesn't really matter anymore, where they're just so fed up that they're like, good, I don't care. In a way that makes it easier, but you have one shot at this life as this you. So maybe you don't have to wait until it gets to the point where you spent so many years being so frustrated before you decide, well, what do you want the parameters of the relationship to be? And again, remember, being nice and being kind doesn't mean being unkind to you. And it might be awkward in the beginning as you navigate some of your relationships. Some of your relationships might get a lot better because you start to take up some space. Some of them might not make it through your kind of reevaluation process about what you want and what you don't, but a lot will. And the other thing I want to say, the thing I want to leave you with, I guess, is don't let everybody else Don't let other people be the sole arbiters of your worth, the sole people who get to determine whether you're okay. Remember, somebody else not liking something that you are saying, if you are actually standing up for yourself or just being honest about a problem in the relationship, they are allowed to have feelings about it, and they're allowed to have whatever feelings they have. And it's not about right or wrong, but it's about you having your feelings and letting those feelings be valid. And somebody else's inability to hear you, that's not what determines whether you have a right to feel or say something. It's honestly true. And again, some of these things you may decide it's not even worth it. The relationship naturally gains some distance. You'll find this with, former classmates or former colleagues or whatever. And look, in this day and age, there are so many people that we may not keep in touch with as much as we actually want to, just because everyone's so busy. So it may not be quite as awkward as it sounds like or as it feels like it could be. But anyway, again, you can be a nice person and still be nice and kind to you. And you get to determine what that looks like. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. I wish you all the very best. Please know that you're worth it and you deserve to feel really good. So until next time, again, this has been another episode of Unpacking Possibility. If you like the episode, please do remember to like, share, follow, leave me a comment. I really want to know what you think. And until next time, as always, be well.